Now we're going to start talking about essential words for TOEFL, IELTS, TOEIC, FCE, CAE, any kind of test, or basically for general comprehension, speaking and writing. Now, of course, the book we look at and the words we look at, they come from a book titled Essential Words for the TOEFL. But when you look at these different books of vocabulary, you see all the same words repeating in different books. That essential words for TOEFL, essential words for IELTS, essential words for TOEIC. You see the titles are different, but the words are exactly the same. Why? Why does that happen? There is something called AWL, or Academic Word List. Linguists looked at words and they looked at the frequency of the words. For a word, frequency of use is very important. Frequency. They wanted to know how frequent a word is, how often a word is mentioned or used in the language. And then you would see some words that are high frequency words. High frequency words. For example, if you have the word accept, isn't accept a very high frequency word? You see it in so many texts, you hear it in speech. So it's a high frequency word, accept. And something could be acceptable. And the word family, the other words that come with it. Then they came up with lists of very high frequency, mid frequency, and low frequency words. So like you can see, for example, the top 100 essential words, the top 400 essential words, the top 1,000 essential words, the top 4,000. So they made this into, actually they started giving it, putting it on a spectrum of frequency, and say, okay, the top 500, the top 100, the top. So when you look at books that talk about essential words, usually these words come from the AWL, the list, the academic word list, based on very, very frequently used words. Now, if you just look at a list of 1,000 to 2,000, max to 3,000 academic word lists, it would say around 2,700 to 2,000. You would know about 70%, you understand some 70% of any academic text that you look at, simply by knowing those words. So if you want to go to college, or if you want to take a test, if it's an academic IELTS test, or if it's a TOEFL test, or if it's a CAE test, or you simply want to read your college textbook and understand it. Do you have to know all the words? No. Most students who actually come to Canada, go to the US, they don't know every single word. Of course, with time, you will know more about your own course. But do we know every word about every single discipline or major that's out there? Of course not. So people can't use the words that they know to guess the words that they don't know. And in these tests, the English proficiency tests, such as IELTS and TOEFL, you're encouraged to guess the words that you don't know from context, right? But some words are so essential that if you don't know those words, it's so hard to guess the rest of the text. So when you read, you should be able to know which one is essential and which one is not very much essential. One way of doing it is, when you read text and you see some words repeating, chances are that that word is an essential word. And you need to go look up that word. We actually have a good guessing system when we read. We know that, okay, I need to know this word in this sentence. This is the key to the overall meaning of a sentence. If I don't know this word, there's no way I can understand it. Now, in tests, the trouble is, when you go to the question, and there's a word in the question that, well, if you don't know that word, there's no way you understand the question, and you don't know even what to look for, what the answer would be. So to solve all these problems, I'm giving you a series of words. It's 33 lessons, I guess. It's a matter of 600, 700 words. Many of them you guys know already. Some of them you don't know. But it's not just about the word itself. So actually, I'm not giving you a word list. I will give you a sentence list. I would like to change it to A-S-L instead of W. Because I don't want you to focus on the word. Rather, I would like you to focus on sentences. And I would like it for you to memorize a very simple, understandable sentence. Could be your own example, based on an example that either I give you or you find in a dictionary, like Longman. And when you have that sentence in mind, there is no way you can misuse that word. There's no way you could ever have problems with usage or using it in the proper context. Because keep that in mind, as I want to start talking about the academic words and sentences, and how those words appear in sentences, whether they're academic or basically any kind of text, keep in mind, please, that words do not appear alone. Words have friends on either side. And these friends, sometimes we call this, what do we call the words that come together? Like salt and pepper?
Collocation.
Collocations. Double, right? Some people by mistake call them collocations. That's a bad mistake. I've had people, I know some teachers, some Canadian teachers who call this by mistake collocation. The mistake is because they don't know it's a double O, so they think, oh, it's location and collocation. No, it's collocation. And the words that collocate together or do not collocate together. So it's a mistake. Every time you hear collocation, that's a terrible mistake. Like to commit a crime. To commit a crime. Collocations are words that come together. It could be a verb and a noun. It could be two nouns coming together. It could be adjectives that come together. The words that naturally appear together in the language. Now, collocations are very important. Because, for example, big room and large room, possible, both. But large crowd and big crowd, there is a big crowd outside or large crowd. Outside the building, there's a large crowd outside the building or a big crowd outside the building chanting slogans, shouting slogans. There's a big, you cannot say, which one is not possible? One of them is possible.
Big crowd.
Is possible?
It's not. I hear big crowd.
So, people say all sorts of things, especially, now these things change with time. They don't stay the same. And also sometimes region by region. But if you take a CAE course, for example, exam, still it's not a recognized collocation, big crowd. So instead there's a large crowd. What I'm trying to tell you is the words, even though words are similar, and they are synonyms, and they appear together in dictionaries as synonyms, that doesn't mean that they're used exactly the same way. Big and great have different meanings, right? Great and grave have different meanings and different connotations. So words have different collocations, but that's why we need to learn words in sentences that are acceptable and native. And if the sentences are acceptable and they're native, the words, then when we use them in sentences, our sentences do not sound like, what? They don't sound so strange. Sometimes things become even funny when you use the wrong collocation or the wrong word. So foreign learners, usually what they do is, they go to classes and they memorize words. Usually students memorize words. When you memorize a word, especially big words, and you should remember that the bigger a word, the narrower its applicability. That is, the bigger the word is, it has a more specialized use. So when we have bigger words, it's because we have special words for special occasions. You cannot use them for general context. So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind. And some of the reasons why we need to memorize sentences and not words. And when you memorize a sentence, you can use that sentence as a model sentence, as a template sentence. And then you can insert your own words and replace, but you should keep the structure until you learn another sentence. So when I talk to Chris and I ask him, Chris, how did you become so fluent? How is it that when you speak, you use native structures? I'm sure, and he actually said it, when he listens to native people, either on movies or outside on the streets here in Canada, when they talk, he picks up the right words in the right context and the right sentences. And he picks up the model. And then he tries to use that model for his own purposes when times arise, when the need arises. So when I say, for example, when the need arises, you know the word arise. If you can look up the word arise, arise. Some people learn the word, oh, I know the word need, but I don't know the word arise. So they go look up the word arise and say, oh, arise means to get up. So they say, oh, arise, arose, arisen. So I arose this morning, and people are like, what? This is exactly what happens to language learners. I arose this morning at 5 o'clock. I'm like, what? You got up? I arose, my teacher said. No, the teacher said when need arises. So it's a very formal way of saying that when there's a need for something. That's why you should learn when need arises. And I said it in a formal situation. If you're talking to your friend, hey, pal, yeah, we should go buy a, Band-Aid when need arises. We're gonna need that. It's like, what? When need arises? So apart from learning words together, that is collocations, we should also learn something that's called a register or speech level. How many different registers do we have in English?
4.
So we have, what are those registers? What is register or level of speech? We have things such as, so if we're talking about register, formal, informal, academic,
And scientific.
well, academic would be scientific, right? And non-academic. Sometimes they have semi-formal. Semi means half. Okay. Darby is my boss, right? And I really like him. He's a very friendly boss. So, if I talk to him, do I speak to him in a formal manner or informal or semi-formal?
Semi-formal.
Semi-formal, because he's the boss. I should mind my speech. At the same time, we're friends. He calls me like sometimes, "Hey, pumpkin," and I'm like, okay. And I call him Jarb. So we're having a good time together. So basically, but that's it. This is it, semi-formal, right? Not formal, formal. Not informal, informal. So it's semi-formal. So this is another thing you need to know about words. So if you're speaking, this is another problem I have with foreign language learners. Because if you learn words from books, chances are you will sound bookish, textbookish. You sound like a book. Have you seen people who sound like a book? Yeah. Again, I have a great student. His name is Tatsuya. Sometimes he watches. So he's amazing. He knows a lot of words because he studies hard. But when he speaks, I'm like, sometimes, how do you speak like that? Because as an American, I grew up speaking to people, friends and stuff, and reading books as well. But if somebody actually, like a friend, sounded like he was reading a book, we were like, what? That sounds very bookish. Yes, there's another word for bookish, would be pedantic, but I wouldn't even use the word pedantic, even though I know the word pedantic. Unless I'm in a, some sort of a university, college atmosphere and addressing a group of college people, academics. Well, we had to do that all the time in the news world. You had to know who you're talking to and adjust your level of speech or register accordingly. So this is something we native speakers, we naturally do it to some extent. Educated people can do that, but you see the people on the street who are not very much educated, one TV goes to them, like the reporter goes to them and the mic is there, and he's still using the same language because he cannot or she cannot, because the language, you need to have this refined language by reading a lot of textbooks to be able to sound like that. So you see that the guy goes like, "Oh yeah, and now, we got huge problems with these frickin' politicians. These politicians all want to like think about their own pockets. You know what? They don't care about you or me. They care about their own frickin' pockets, man." Damn. So it's like, hey, dude, you think they're thinking about you and me, man? They don't give a rat's ass about what we do, man. Yeah. For all I care, they can all go to hell. Yeah. And you can refine it a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. But this ability to maneuver between different registers is something we acquire through hard work and endless hours of studying, reading books. So these are a few things I wanted to say before even talking about words. So basically, guys, what I want you to do is please everybody. There are a couple things about words. Never learn them alone. What we say outside context, out of context, out of context. Never learn a word out of context. Never, ever. And indeed, what you should do now is contextualize the words you already know. My number one problem is not with the words that you do not know. My number one problem is with the words that you do know. Because it's the words that you do know that you misuse and use in the wrong context. And how does that happen? Because you memorize the word and not the sentence, and you want to use your own words. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's a beautiful thing." In so many ESL schools, unfortunately, there's a new trend right now. It's a trend. They look at this phenomenon as an integral part of language acquisition. And I say this, I know this is a little boring, but I want to say it today and then move on. In most language schools, here in Canada, for example, or if you go to the US, now the trend is, well, it's ESL, so let them talk, let them make their own sentences. And it's beautiful. The reason behind this, they say, okay, you guys talk to each other, talk to each other, talk to each other, talk to each other, and the teacher just walks around. They say, well, in the old days, when teachers corrected students every single turn, that stopped conversation, that hampered conversation. Students didn't learn to talk, but this way they learned to talk. They learned to converse. This whole idea, guys, I want you to know this, because you're language learners, and I'm sure you've been learning the language for so many years. Now, in the past, I'm talking about after World War II, there came one method that became actually, it wasn't created then, but it was called the Army method in the US. The Army method in the US, Americans needed to fight the Germans and help the rest of the world against, not the Germans, the Nazis back then. So a lot of people needed to be able to pass as Germans or they would die. It was pass as a German, sound like a German or die. Why? Because you're at war, so they would, haven't you watched movies about World War II? So they would catch these soldiers and there was a checkpoint. These were in the enemy lines. So the Americans and the Brits and all that, they wanted to pass through the checkpoints. And what they did was, haven't you watched these movies? And that there's a checkpoint and the German guy, Chris, would talk to me in German. And he would just ask me a few German words. Like guten Tag, yeah? What would you say? Yeah? Was machen Sie? Ich nachte Sie ja. What? And the other guy was supposed to say something back. If he was German, he could pass. If he was not German, he would say, ah! And God knows what happened to those people. So it was a matter of life and death, and they wanted to speak the language exactly like a German. So what they did was they put these poor soldiers in classes, and like for hours and hours, they got them to really repeat some phrases. Say Guten Tag in German?
Guten Tag.
Okay, Guten Tag. Am I good? They would ask them to repeat and repeat like so, until so was actually, would sound like a,
So.
would sound exactly like Japanese. And those phrases, so they would give them some native phrases and they would ask them to repeat and repeat and repeat. This became known as the Army method. It worked with conversation because people learned some phrases and some words and they repeated those things and they sounded like a native speaker. For example, if you learn, hey, what's up, George? What's up? If you learn the sound of, hey, what's up? You see a lot of people who look just like you and like me here, and they sound exactly like they speak sharp Canadian English better than many, many white people who are known to be Canadians. So by some mistake, people who say, anyway, if somebody sees Chris on the street here, they would think, okay, he's Canadian. Or if we go to America, they would say, he's American, and I'm like, a Middle Eastern. He'll be known as the American, and not me. Because people usually judge by looks, whoever is whiter and has like more color eyes and all that. So they go like, oh, he's the American. Jackson usually has an issue with this. Yeah. And he's so angry about it, right? He's so like, oh, I'm the Canadian. Jackson goes like, I'm the Canadian. Kirk is not a Canadian. George is not an actual Canadian. I'm the Canadian. So he's an angry Canadian. But now, the problem with that approach was, it was called parrot learning. You know parrot learning?
Parrot.
Is parrot double R or one R?
It's
Double.
double
R.
Yeah. So parrot learning, or rote learning, was known to be very mechanical. It was very mechanical. Because there wasn't much cognitive process involved in it. There wasn't much thinking involved. You wouldn't think about the things you heard. You just memorized them. But it worked. For a long time it really worked. Because hey, say, if you learn Saki, say, hey, what's up, Ray?
Hey, what's up, Ray?
Yeah, but you should learn it with the exact way people use. Look, every language has its own melody. If my melody doesn't sound German, I would be caught by that soldier and the guy. Because Americans, they're not, what's up, Ray? They're not like that. They're not like that. The melody is like, hey, what's up? What's up? What's up? Hey, what up? So some go like, wait, what up? Hey, what up? Some say, what's up? Yeah? So like, what's up? So if you come to me as a friend and say, hey, Will, what's up? And sound like this, from the very beginning I would know that you're Canadian, American, or something like that. I wouldn't think you're a language learner if you say it exactly like that. Because that's just so native. So when you go for an interview, the first couple of words, the way you say good morning, the guy kind of knows. If I walk in, hey, morning, no language learner would ever walk and say morning. Good morning. That's like a language learner. Hey, morning, morning. So when you walk in like morning, this is native, right? So, or you want to go to sleep, night, night. Because it's night. Hey, night. That's native, right? And the way you say it, the tone of your voice, the melody and everything like that. So all these things come with a word. It's not just that word. It's the way you pronounce it, it's the way you sound, and the way you say it. Now, some people, I want to tell you how funny it is. Some people learn that in American English, for example, instead of saying this year, sometimes you say this year. And then they go like, yeah, this year. Well, I say it all the time. Because where I come from, people would say this year. So, but if you want to say it in like the way that you're struggling with language and you're trying to learn it, because it's highly colloquial, it's highly street language, right? So if you say, like somebody, this year we are, I mean, this is ridiculous, right? It sounds stupid. So if you want to say this year, you gotta like learn it in context with all the melody and all the things that go with it. So a person who says this year would sound different. And as you see, the melody of language as I speak right now is like zoop, 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 zoop in English. So when you look at words, once again, I want you to learn everything with it. Now the problem with that approach was, many of these guys said, okay, in language schools around the world, this method was later known as the audiolingual method. I don't know if you've heard this. Audiolingual. So later, somebody named Noam Chomsky came, and you should hear the word Noam Chomsky at least once in your lives. Noam Chomsky. He's a Jewish origin, but he's atheist. Like his parents were Jews, but he's an atheist. He's against Zionism. He's against the things Israel is doing. He is the greatest linguist of all time. He changed the history of linguistics and turned it on its head at a very young age. Now he's about 80 years old, I guess. Sorry if I'm mistaken. And he's kind of sick. And I've interviewed him a few times. He is a renowned linguist. He changed what people thought about linguistics and languages. So he said, he came up with his generative grammar. He came with the idea that was the basis for what was later called the cognitive code. And what happened with the cognitive code, he said, before in audiolingualism, and those people who said language was thought to be based on habits. Language in audiolingualism and before, language was a set of habits. Chomsky's generative grammar proved that language is a set of rules. It's rule-based, not habit-based. rules. Based on this, applied linguists, those who work on teaching language, teachers, came together and said, oh, it's about rules. It's not about habit. Because before then, people said, if you ever make a mistake in the class, the teacher should stop you right then and say, stop. Goes, go, no, goes, she goes, goes. Repeat. This row, goes. That row, goes. Everybody, goes. Anna, goes. Javi, goes. Everybody, she goes, he goes. Okay, this row, that row. This was, yeah. Everybody go.
Lisa!
Yeah. And right after this, we'll have our break, and then we'll start having a look at this. But only a couple of minutes are left from this conversation. So, then people said, after Chomsky, no, it's not habits. You shouldn't stop the person. Actually, when you stop somebody, they stop thinking. They repeat these words and phrases like parrots, and without understanding things. Then they said, no, students should actually start experimenting with these rules of language, should make their own sentences, should be free to have their own free style of conversation, and mistakes are a good integral part of learning a foreign language. So then they said you should have communicative drills, you should let the students talk with themselves. The teacher is not the authority who stands in the class and corrects everyone and is like a stuff. Rather, the teacher would be facilitator who fades into the background. The students take center role and center stage. The students lead the class. The students actually talk to themselves. Many are right now saying even books are bullshit. We don't need books. The students would give us the material. They sit down and talk. They're the best. And you don't need to correct them all the time. Now, the problem with that approach is, these students who go through this, fine. They learn to communicate. Somehow they learn to communicate. And all the time they experiment with language. So they say this, they learn that is right, they say that, this is right. The problem is when these kids want to go to college, or they want to take a proficiency test, because the test expects you to be able to write proper English usage. And you haven't learned it in those classes because your teachers just encourage you to talk. And occasionally, if ever, corrected you. So now what I want to say is we have gone the extreme bad way now. And in most ESL classes around the world, what they do is you play some games, and the only person who seems to be very much amused with the game is the teacher. What a game of playing in the class. Those games are stupid, and I'm saying it loud and clear, and they are a huge waste of time. Because the students, instead of focusing on the language itself and learning to converse and talk and do it, they are mostly thinking about those techniques of the game and all that. Yes, they do learn a few words, but that's 70% waste of time. More than 70%. 70% is an understatement. 90%. Any game any teacher plays in any class is 90% waste of time. The best games are 90% waste of time. 90%. Yes, if people are really tired and you want to play a game, to have 10% education, it's good, I understand. Now, when minds are tired, we've had 4 hours of instruction, we want to play a game which is related to English. But if that's the core of your instruction, which is unfortunately the case with many schools right now, and they think, oh, they're so good. Everybody liked the class and enjoyed it. And they walked out. Or the process of students only talking to students, because we are creating an environment. Yes, it may work somehow in a country where English is not the language, but not in Canada, not in the US. When you walk out the store, you're using English all the time. In here, what I want to say now is, the method should be a mixture of two. Yes, language is rule-based. Yes, there should be a time for you to be free and speak. But yes, language is also habits. If I get into the habit of saying he goes instead of he go, every time I say he go, I know something's missing. But if I don't build that habit, I don't even get it that something's missing. That's why most of these, and that's where a word comes into being. That word is called fossilization. These errors will be fossilized. You know fossil? What's a fossil?
The rest, the bones of an animal.
Fossilize. Fossilization. Like a fossil, these errors become fossilized. That is, every time you say he go, it remains in your mind. He go, he come, he do. Because it's in your mind. And unfortunately, you build a habit, but the wrong habit. Which is the result of many of these stupid classes with uninformed teachers who think that, okay, the students are only supposed to sit down and build their own sentences and enjoy, and mistakes are an integral process of learning a language, so let the student talk. Fine, let the student talk. I'm not against stopping students at every turn. But I do, after 22 years of actual teaching in so many different countries and so many different places, I now truly, truly believe that language is, of course, a rule-based formation of habits. So I would want to say goodbye to all of this, and I would say a rule-based formation of habits. That's why I'm telling you, when you're learning a new word, think about the habit you're making. Start it on the right platform. And the right platform is an example sentence or context that you can rely on. You know you heard it from that native speaker. You know that you read it in that native written book, the book. You know that you heard it from that native speaking teacher. And it's good to not only learn the word in that context, but to know about the register, the level of speech of that context. Was it a formal situation? For example, the president called on prime minister to resign. He urged the prime minister to resign. Okay, you learn it. So the president called on the people, for example, to maintain calm. This is news language, right? I've done this for 17 years, so I can speak like a news guy without even reading a text. I can do that for hours. So the president called on the public to maintain calm in the face of the oncoming events, including contingencies. Big words. Do I speak like that with a friend? No. Do I speak like that even with my teacher? No. So the hard part is for me, and the part that becomes rather funny for native speakers when you actually talk to them, when you go to your house mother and talk to your house mother, and sometimes she might laugh, because if you use the word in the wrong context, it's like when you go over and you see this cute, I don't want to name names, like a Japanese girl, for example, and then thinking, or someone from Vietnam, fuck you. Fuck you. Because it's a word she just learned, for example, or heard. And I do not, and then you hear the word that the native speakers use fucking all the time. I do not know how to maintain my fucking time, and wrong word, wrong context, right? So, after all I've said, I just want to sum up everything. To sum it all up. Yes, there are word lists. Yes, there are essential words and non-essential words. Essential words are a family of words that would not be more than a couple thousand, 3,000. If you know these few thousand words, you understand at least 70% of all academic texts. Next, learn the words with the words that appear around them. We call them collocations. And the level of speech of the word. So this was an introduction into this list of words that we have ahead from now on. And I'm not going to repeat this story, but I'm going to give you examples. And I would expect you to remember the examples, not just the word itself. So if I give you a word that's acclaim, for example, acclaim is a big word. how would you learn it? With an example. You should know that the word acclaim, for example, comes with the verb to win. Mark Twain won international acclaim for his masterpiece named The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So I see the sentence, but I see he won international acclaim. So I should pick up Mark Twain won international acclaim for his, or after the release of his bestseller, or best-selling novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And I would know, somehow you can guess, that this sentence sounds rather informal or formal? Formal, if not academic, at least formal. So I can use this, if I'm supposed to use this. And I would know that it's used to win international acclaim. Sometimes, when you sit down and you think, you have the word acclaim, and you want to use it with something in your sentence. You need a verb for it. You don't know what the verb is. Do you do acclaim? Do you get acclaim? Do you acquire acclaim? Do you gain acclaim? Do you obtain acclaim? What do you do with acclaim?
Win.
But then, you'll learn in that example to win acclaim. And if you go to a dictionary like Lungman that gives you collocations, it actually says to win acclaim, to what acclaim, then international acclaim. It gives you some other synonyms for it. It's good to think of that to enrich your vocabulary and also the options that you have, to increase the options that you have at your disposal. At your disposal means at hand, next time you want to use it. Thank you very much. Let's have a break and then start having a look at this, see what we have ahead.
But I